Hello my friends and welcome back. It's Wednesday, so happy Wednesday to you. In today's video, the first topic we are going to watch actually Su-57, the newest and the baddest Russian fighter jet. And here is a thread which explains perfectly what it really is, how much of a theft it is, and perhaps the whole platform is designed to make stealing more money possible. I'll read you a short thread that analyzes perfectly what the platform actually is, and that it's nothing more than an Su-35 with a little bit of a paper upgrade, we can call it that. What the Su-57 fighter can do and its destruction can tell us about the general state of the Russian army. Like the T-14 Armata tank, it is simply a PR project of the Russian army. The purpose of which is not to build a fifth-generation aircraft, which it never was, but to get the state budget and steal the money. That's what it is. And the thing is, Americans and Western NATO powers project their capabilities onto the Russians. Oh, the Russians also have a fifth-generation fighter. We gotta also develop ours better. We gotta mass-produce the F-35. We gotta sell it all over the world. Well, in reality, Russia never had the fifth-generation fighter. Su-57 is not stealth. It is not a fifth-generation fighter. It is not mass-produced. Only 15 of them were ever made, and now only 14 are left because Ukraine destroyed one and damaged another. Now the Su-57 is much more expensive than the Su-35, although it has pretty much the same capabilities, only a redesigned look with more sharper edges, and with the design it resembles more F-35 with its sharper edges. And if we can think that sharper edges mean stealth, then no, they don't. In the case of the F-35, it's the paint, it's the design, it's the secret materials used, the secret paint coating on it. But in the case of Su-57, it is only the outside look that is different, not the capabilities. Now, my friends, let's take a quick look of how the West is playing the escalation game, or how they're dealing with their fear of escalation. Here is Anton Herashenko. I really like his analysis, and he brings us a few points throughout this 2.5 years of war. This really has been true. Everything that has been done by the West for Ukraine, before it was done, it was denied for a long time. We will not give Ukraine military aid. Ukraine will hold out against Russia for 2 to 3 weeks at most. We will not give Ukraine lethal weapons. We will not give Ukraine F-16s. We will not give Ukraine long-range weapons. Our long-range weapons cannot be used for strikes on Russian territory. Our long-range weapons cannot be used to hit Moscow and the Kremlin. And here we are now. Each of these, let's call it red lines, are set by the West to themselves. What Ukraine can or cannot do with their weapons, or what will be given to Ukraine. And a few months later, the opposite is done. So the West, by stating, publicly communicating that we will not do this, we will not give Ukraine these capabilities, this controls the escalation that they're so much afraid of. This signals Russia that here is the line, we're not going to cross it, and then they very slowly cross it and see the reaction. Usually there is no reaction, since Russia doesn't have any capability to react. And this is how each of these, let's call it then again, red lines has been crossed one by one, and here we are now. Right now, Western weapons, actually United States weapons, can only be used on Belgorod Oblast, not in other oblasts. This can change if Russia makes another huge strategic blunder, like opening the new Kharkiv front, which was the reason for the United States allowance to use its weapons on Belgorod Oblast. Perhaps after another such blunder by Russia, United States suddenly says, okay, feel free to bombard Moscow. We will see, my friends. Now we actually do go to Moscow. In Russia and occupied Crimea, there is a partisan group called ATESH. They are partisans who are working closely together with Ukraine, and they are fighting for the independence of Russia from Putin's tyrannical government and political elite structure that he has set up in 20 years. Now, a ATESH partisan member in Moscow destroyed a satellite communication station, and he filmed it all with his phone. Just like that. Watching the video, it looked like to be very easy for him. Just go, put gasoline all over it, pull the match, and boom, up in flames it goes. Incredibly expensive equipment, nobody guarding it. Possibly very hard to reproduce this equipment. It was just burn it to the ground. Boom. Here on the map you can see where it was burnt, in these forests, northwest from Moscow. Look, just pouring gasoline from a bottle, probably filled in a local gas station, onto the Russian super elite, super new and modern satellite communication dish, pulling the match, and bada bing, bada boom. Up in flame it goes. Look at it. This is beautiful. Now we have to talk about the air defense systems given to Ukraine, especially Patriot systems. There are talks in Germany of giving the 4th Patriot system for Ukraine, also 100 Patriot missiles. Also United States, now there are talks that US will give its 2nd Patriot system for Ukraine. And this is supposed to reach Ukraine in the coming days, since it's in Poland already. For the longest period of time, everybody was talking how Ukraine is in high need of this and nobody was doing it, and now suddenly there are 2 coming. This is very big news, and it saves civilian and military lives directly, since it destroys aerial targets, although it is very expensive. Right now, there is a NAFO convoy driving to Kyiv. Not going to say where they are right now or what route they are taking, but as we are speaking, a NAFO convoy with friends on it that I know are driving to Kyiv. And today there was a massive missile and drone attack against Kyiv. Now, they will be there, and then the attack is already in the past, of course. Having been under a missile attack almost every time I've been in Kyiv, let me tell you, knowing that there is a Patriot system in Kyiv almost always present, it makes me sleep a little bit more calmer, although you still wake up to the bangs. These 2 systems will make a big of a difference, and if Ukraine is allowed to use them in their famous hit-and-run tactics, anti-aircraft ambushes against Russian bombers Su-34 and Russian fighters, then we will also see a lot of Russian aviation losses coming up. This is very good news. Now, my friends, we gotta go to the land of Mr. Potato Head. We gotta go to Belarus. Potato Head, of course, being Lukashenko, if you didn't get that. Belarus, not like Russia, only has 2 oil refineries, oil refining capabilities, and Novopolotsk oil refinery, which you can see in this video, burned yesterday. Oh, so sad. This oil refinery is one of Belarusian's biggest export right now of oil products, meaning it's Lukashenko's biggest revenue for foreign currencies, including dollar, pound, and euro. If this is burning, Lukashenko's money is burning, since he's also part of the Putin's stealing game, stealing from Russians, stealing from Belarusians. So this is very good news. And if we talk already about oil refining capabilities, we cannot miss Gazprom. Now, Gazprom is supposedly a company, but it's not really a company. It does resemble our Russian economic situation quite closely. Since the Rosstat, Russian statistics, are not published anymore, or Russians are nitpicking which statistics they publish, we don't really know how the economy is doing. Because based on that statistics, it's growing. But they are hiding most of the statistics necessary to say if the economy is really growing and healthy. But we can all see Gazprom's market cap. We can all see the loss and profit they're making. There's no profit, there's only a loss. And that is owned majority by the Russian state, and all of the revenues, at least 80%, are going to the Russian state and to the Putin's inner circle. Of that 80% of Gazprom's revenue, a huge portion is immediately stolen, and the rest is left to run the country. As we know, Russia gets most of their money from selling oil and gas products, and the biggest portion of that is Gazprom. So when Gazprom falls, Russian economy falls, and then the Russian army falls, because they also get most of their funding from selling oil and gas products. Gazprom is now a loss-making corporation, which means a Russian business model is collapsing. Putin is sending messages through intermediaries suggesting he wants to freeze the conflict. His original war aim, conquering the whole of Ukraine, is no longer attainable. We must stay the course to attain a just peace. And a just peace is territorial integrity for Ukraine, including Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk under Ukrainian liberation. Let's look at Gazprom's market cap. And I know market cap is a very limited way to analyze any kind of company, but Gazprom is not a regular company. It resembles the well-being or not so well-being of the Russian state very closely, much more closely than the Rosstat statistics that are nitpicked. And look at this chart. Look at it. That is the highest point, almost 200 billion of Gazprom's market cap. Now it is falling. It is in free fall. There doesn't seem to be any stop to this free fall, any stabilization, and Putin is burning his war chest. What he did with 15, 20 years of Gazprom's profits, he put them into a huge pile, not literally but figuratively. War chest, hundreds of billions of foreign assets in Moscow, in Russia, in Russian banks to be used when necessary. Now he's pumping all of that into the economy, not the economy, but just war, producing weapons, tanks, grenades, bombs, planes. That doesn't give anything back to the economy. It is an investment that never brings money, profit back from that investment, because it will be destroyed in Ukraine. It always will. So this is why this chart right here, it's not only Gazprom, but also the Russian state. This is the chart of the Russian economy. And while Putin has made a huge error on the gamble against Ukrainians that they will give up and that Zelensky will leave Kyiv, we will take it in 3 days. Unknowingly to him, he has become the biggest salesman of NATO. That is an old joke already. Finland and Sweden joined, they would have never wanted to join. Before, there were polls almost every year. If you want to join Finnish, if you want to join Swedish, they didn't need it. They thought they're fine, and they didn't want to escalate with Russia. Well, after Putin's gamble, now they did. But Sweden and Finland are not the only countries that Putin, as the biggest salesman of NATO, affected. This is a Ukrainian chart, actually. Survey date, October 2013. Ukrainians against NATO is 66%. Ukrainians against NATO 1 year before Putin's annexation of Crimea. No Ukrainian wanted, majority of Ukrainians did not want to join NATO. Ukraine is for NATO, only 20. After the Russian occupation of Crimea and part of Donbass, November 2014 and August 2021, Ukrainians against NATO, 25% and 35%. Ukraine is for NATO, 51% and 54%. Suddenly a majority is for NATO after Putin's, let's call it, war against Ukraine to stop the expansion of NATO. His war to stop the expansion of NATO is the very reason for the expansion of NATO. This is the Oedipus complex, right? You want to keep something from happening and you do a lot for it not to happen, and by doing that you call it into being. Putin being the biggest salesman of NATO. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, only 3% of Ukrainians are against NATO and 86% are for NATO. The rest percentage is like non-aligned. My friends, now I'll jump to my home country, and Finland also. From Estonia's second biggest city, Tartu, there is a new direct flight to Finland. That didn't happen before, but now it is a reality. It has only been operating about 6 months, but now it has to stop. Why? Because Russians are jamming our airspace. They're literally jamming so heavily that we cannot fly. This flight has to be stopped. And here is the jamming map. We can actually see where it's the strongest. Around St. Petersburg, they have a stationary jammer there, a very strong one. That takes a lot of power, because all of them do. And in Kaliningrad, they have another one which is incredibly powerful. They are jamming the Baltic airspace, the Baltic Sea and Finnish airspace, which you might think does not do much because there's no kamikaze drones, but it actually puts civilians' lives in danger because it jams civilian aircraft who are flying over this airspace all the time. And if we know Russian history with civilian airliners, for example the Malaysian Airlines, then we know that they don't care at all. So this new beautiful airline going from Tartu to Finland, which would make people living in Tartu their lives so much easier if they want to go to Finland, has to stop now. It has been cancelled many times. And this is a hybrid weapon that Russia is using against the European Union and NATO without those very European Union and NATO countries calling it a weapon. That is our biggest weakness. We don't recognize when we are being attacked. Estonia and Finland do, but Germany doesn't. Same weapons are being used in Germany. Russian Orthodox Patriarchy operating in Germany, in France, the far-right politicians in these countries, Russian schools, Russian cultural centers, all of that is weaponized in a hybrid warfare against Europe and NATO. And this jamming of Estonia and Finland is only one part of it. We recognize it as a weapon, but Central Europe needs to follow suit. Let's call it what it is. It's a war against us. Now, my friends, I want to guide your attention to this map. This is a German map. Germany, nowadays, modern German map, no, not in the past. But you can see it's like it's four sectors again. The Western Germany and the Eastern Germany, where the Stasi was so active. This is the Eastern Germany. But this, I don't know if you would believe me, but this is the election map of 2024 Euro parliamentary elections. And blue represents majority and far-right politicians being elected. And as you can see, in Eastern Germany, only far-right was elected. The majority was always far-right, over 40%. And in the West Germany, nobody elected the far-right. Now, I would be naive and stupid to blame this only on Soviet occupation. This issue existed before the Soviet occupation. This map is the very same German condition that Hitler weaponized when he came to power. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons. The 1930s crash, end of the World War I, and the conditions put on Germany. But Hitler weaponized the radicals from East Germany to Nazify all of Germany. It started from there. Angela Merkel was from East Germany. So these peoples in East Germany still vote like there was no Soviet occupation, like there was no Second World War. And that is what we call the German condition. It's two different states merged into one, and even the subsidizations of hundreds of billions from West Germany have not changed East German population voting patterns, for example. And unfortunately, the voting patterns of East Germany are very good for Putin. They are benefiting Putin. Even if they're not directly for Russian expansion, they're useful idiots for him, allowing him to maximize his influence in Europe, in the middle of Germany. Because unfortunately, far left and far right, all of the extremities are always weaponized in Europe by Russia. They are weaponized. They're turned into a weapon, not for Russia, but to make conflict within Europe, and conflict within Europe always benefits Russia. My friends, look at this video. This is a United States Air Force RQ-7 Global Hawk surveillance drone, and it's flying. Look where it's flying. Greece, Bulgaria, then the Black Sea, and it is going very close to Crimea, 100 kilometers. Now, this drone is not a joke. It's a United States recon drone, very capable. And it costs one piece, one drone, no, not 200 euros, not 1,000 like we're used to. This costs $250 million, almost $250 million this drone costs. It's almost more expensive than anything that Russia has in Ukraine, except for some few radar systems. Now, this drone flew so close to Crimea. This says us much more than meets the eye. This tells us that the United States is now quite confident in Ukrainian capabilities in destroying air defense in Crimea, that they dare to risk this drone so close to Crimea. Ukraine has withered down one by one Russian air defense systems in Crimea, making room for the entering of the F-16 to the picture. But now that we see United States drones flying so close to the peninsula, this tells us, really paints a picture of how bad the situation for Russian air defense really is. They're really lacking. They are not protected. And I saw Russian telegrams, the chatter was like sarcastic that our best air defense are guys with machine guns. That's enough. That's all we need to protect the Su-57s, for example. This is going to be the undoing for Russian occupation in Crimea, since no air defense plus F-16s for Ukraine means unstoppable bombarding of everything that Russia has there. Russian air defense crews already got an order to evacuate their families from Crimea. All of these pieces of information paint a picture that something very, very bad for Russian army is happening in Crimea. Now this is the Kerch Bridge connecting mainland Russia to Russian-occupied Crimea. What do we see here? A train. It's a fuel train. You might say, oh, boring, why are we watching a fuel train? My friends, Crimean Bridge was not used for fuel trains for over a year almost. Ever since Ukrainians' second attack against the bridge, it was repaired, but it was not fully never repaired to carry heavy loads, heavy trains. So there are two informations here. The fact that Russia is using Crimean Bridge for fuel again indicates that Ukraine has destroyed all the alternatives. What were the alternatives? Ferry transport, also rail ferries. Yes, they had ferries that carry trains. I don't know how crazy that sounds, but that was the reality. Ukraine destroyed those. They have been focusing down Russian ferries, amphibious landing ships, everything, barges for example, anything that can carry logistics. Ukrainians have been focusing those down even ahead of military ships. Just logistics ships. Now most of these are destroyed. How do we know? Well, because this is the first fuel train over the Kerch Bridge in the last, 8 months, 10 months, almost a year. Secondly, we know that this Kerch Bridge is still not strong enough to carry a full fuel train. Hence the reason Russians didn't want to do it before. But Russian army in the south of Ukraine needs fuel. So we can assume that these fuel tanks are half full, since the bridge cannot carry a full train. Third information we can get for it is Ukraine has destroyed Russian logistics capabilities over this water because they want to focus Russian logistics onto this bridge. Now it has been happening. Russian trains are back on the Kerch Bridge. But why? Well, if you control where the Russians conduct their logistics, you can attack it. So we might expect something beautiful to happen in the Kerch Bridge, some bada bing, bada boom perhaps. And Russians are really afraid of it, which you can see on the next photo here. Satellite video actually. These are Russian defensive mechanisms around the Kerch Bridge, mostly just a physical barrier, as you can see, barges to block Ukrainian maritime drones. And that's how it is. They are really afraid. And now that Russian Southern Army grouping is again dependent on this bridge for fuel, food and ammunition, this defensive line here is more important for Russians, and if the bridge would be destroyed, it would be more damaging for Russians. This is again months-long Ukrainian strategy of focusing down, like they do with artillery and air defense, focusing down Russian logistical maritime capabilities. This is it for today, my friends. Before I go, I want to guide you to Artur Rehi podcast because recently we had an episode with Brandon Mitchell. You can see it on the screen. It was really interesting to listen to his stories. He's currently living in Sweden, but he wants to go back to Ukraine. He has saved countless lives in Ukrainian stabilization points near Kherson, always working at night, resting by day, and men are being into his stabilization point. He patches them up and sends them forward to hospitals, saving the lives by stopping bleeding and stabilizing their wounds. These stories are incredible. He also brought in some medical supplies for me to take to Kyiv. Go and check it out. Link is in the description below. Until my next video, my friends, which will be tomorrow, be back. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.